Your phone?
Yeah, my Mac computer isn't actually Zoom compatible. This is an old Mac.
Okay.
It gets the same effect as a computer. Once I get a new laptop, my dad's supposed to bring me one. I'll be doing it from the laptop going forward. This
Okay.
was just improvised. But anyway, all right, everyone. Welcome back to the Autistic Experience podcast. So this week we're bringing another we're bringing another guest from the LinkedIn platform over. I have today what we call a resume writer and career strategist who I happen to know through a few people, and her name is Tammy. So what she's going to be doing today is telling us a little bit about, kind of how she started her business and also a little about her career story. Okay? So, in honor of the fact that you have a X amount of time, I'll ask my first question. So,
Sure.
what age were you when you came here from Trinidad and Tobago, which is in the Caribbean?
I was 16. I finished high school and I came here to attend college. And yeah, I attended
What
Meg.
year were you? What year was that you immigrated here?
Oh my, now you're asking me my age now.
No, not. It's not asking you your age for the sake
In
of
the late
asking your.
90s, in the late 90s. I'll leave it at that.
Okay, fair enough. Listen, I'm only a couple of years younger. It's not like we all don't get asked this question. I'll give you a good one. I have some younger colleagues who think I don't even look 39,
Oh, that's nice.
except I have grays coming in.
That's nice.
All right. So, when you were a little kid, what would you say your first dream career was?
So actually, I wanted to be a journalist. I always admired the newscast and the late night, the 7 o'clock news, and I enjoyed the stories that they'll share. And I just thought of myself being, wanting that role up until my teenage years when I really started to get involved in the arts, and that informs my me pursuing my bachelor's in graphic arts production management, where I worked in advertising for about 4 to 5 years before going back for my master's and getting my MPA with a focus on human resources. So that took a turn in my career without.
Funny, I just noticed something when I was going to look at your work history very briefly. College in New Rochelle, does that mean you came out here for school?
Yes, yes, yes.
So they got bought by my alma mater, which was Mercy College, which is now rebranded as Mercy University. And
Yeah.
the funny thing is, when they changed their name to university last year, I'm like, wait, I thought a university had to have more land or campus size to be considered a university, and then apparently not, because they consider it based on program size.
Yeah.
Especially since within the last decade, while I was finishing, they were originally known for the Masters in Education and then also for OT and for occupational and physical therapy majors, but they've since added a lot more programs. And then they added this whole new thing called, uh, what was the whole new thing they added? I'd have to show it to you in email, but basically they added like Coursera level online courses that could also be taken in person,
Yes.
which I guess, yeah, everyone's now jumping on the tech boot camp trend.
Yeah.
So, okay. Now your first role, it looks like, was an account manager in a newspaper company. What was being an account
So,
manager like?
so I worked for News Corporation. That is the overarching body of the New York Post. But I worked on specifically in the sector, in the area of business, supporting the community newspapers. So while we were under the News Corp umbrella, New York Post, sometimes I will work on the New York Post, but essentially my responsibilities were geared towards supporting ad placements in a chain of community newspapers that served Brooklyn, Queens, Staten Island, New York tri-state area.
Funny, because if I remember correctly, the New York Post is actually owned by frigging Rupert Murdoch.
Rupert Murdoch, yes, yes.
And they were always a very right-wing newspaper.
They have been. They have been. Those were some challenging years working there, but fun.
Oh, I'm sure it was very interesting, especially when you get too much of one particular community. Not trying to go the way of certain types of people on social media who just blame that one particular large group for everything. But unfortunately, with that one particular large group, that's where the money's concentrated.
Well, because my focus was on the community newspapers and
yeah,
Brooklyn, especially Brooklyn, Queens, I found delight in engaging in some of the smaller businesses within those communities, amplifying their voice and their brand. So it was kind of the ethos and the energy and the content of those newspapers were very much different from the New York Post. It was more community driven, fun happenings, of course, highlighting business, that sort of thing. So.
And then you performed, it looks like, the same account manager position for at least one more. Oh no, you did account manager one more time at Staples, and then Hebrew. I've not heard of this organization.
Hebrew, okay.
A little bit about them.
So let me tell you about this, and this goes back to the situation where companies will name a position or a job title will be specific through company, but the duties are different. For example, at Staples, I was responsible for print collateral and print advertising for businesses. A lot of people, what a lot of people don't know is that Staples actually print on a corporate level. We print pens, tchotchkes, and they do a lot of branding for larger brands.
Like so the easy button.
Yes, yeah, very much like that. But if you had, like, let's say an insurance company, you were trying to get collateral, advertising collateral, tchotchkes for your customers and so forth, those were the accounts I handled. So I was responsible for educating my customers with regard to their branding, taking those branding elements and advising them on how it will print across whatever substrates they wanted it to. So while it said account manager, a lot of production and educating the customer on achieving or getting their brand out on print was heavily essentially my role.
I feel like what a lot of corporate does nowadays, you can correct me if I'm wrong, is they will call a role one thing, but the responsibilities will be
one exactly.
So they'll call stuff like in healthcare. I have a friend up in Massachusetts who they call his union position an analyst over at the Department of Health, but what he actually does is he doesn't necessarily do a lot of data related stuff. He assembles packets and stuff for like community, because he for like community healthcare
drives. Right. Yeah, very much so. So while my role was kind of heavily on the production management aspect of the branding and printing, there was some account management there as well, because I would check in with the clients and see what they're looking to print on or market for each month, and I would lead that campaign or marketing. And yeah, but that's what I did for up to 4 or 5 years. And then
You switched over to recruitment, it looks like.
yes, what pushed
What
me?
sort of went into that decision to go into recruitment? Were you bored with account management?
So I listen to me. I love print. I love art, but I got tired of making money for larger corporations, really. And the environment there, the corporate environment, it's very challenging and very highly competitive. And that's not my nature. While I do enjoy talking about print and art and design. um, so I went back and I got my master's in my MPA, right?
Oh, public administration.
Public administration with a focus on human resources. And while pursuing my master's, I interviewed for a role, an account management role as a recruiter. Essentially, I used my skills in attracting business and gaining business to kind of move into that role. And that's how that transition was made.
Okay, so that would explain how you ended up at Grant Associates as a recruitment specialist.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Now, if you were going to say you got tired of making money for corporations, wouldn't recruitment effectively be close to that as well?
It is. And I love that you highlight that. But in turn, I'm also helping an individual secure a position.
Right. No. There's definitely, I left that part out of it, and then I was probably going to say something regarding to that. Yes, it can cover two different functions, but I feel like it's the first part that's still a little more obvious within the recruitment realm, and especially because the LinkedIn platform, no joke, is literally recruiter making content driven.
Yes.
And not always for good purposes. And I will just lightly leave it at that. There's some things that I see on a daily basis, especially from recruiters, where I'm like, why are you giving this type of advice that nobody asked for specifically, or trying to be too general? And then after, obviously you did 2 years and 5 months with that. Now we go to the one that probably launched your business, which you only spent 8 months at. That would be the career coach or client services coordinator. How did you get that role?
Well, I love that you made that observation, Ben. And I think from my role, or my first role as a recruiter at Grant Associates, kind of hate that we're calling the name of the company now, but yeah, and then moving into career services and workforce development, this was the launching pad for my career in resume writing. And because as a recruiter, I found myself editing and formatting and fixing resumes before sending out the candidate to my client companies. And then in my career advising capacity at the other organization, I worked closely with persons who were seeking to return into the job market on their career collateral, and helped them craft strategies for returning into the workforce. So these roles were the impetus for what I do now.
So I don't know if you would have had any of these when you were working at NADP, because I don't know what the client level was for within that realm. But did you ever come across applications or clients that happen to be, in my case, on the spectrum?
I haven't. No.
Okay, no,
It was a
it's
specific
something for this particular new branded podcast. There's more. It's sort of more of there's a little bit going to be a focus or questions depending on the person, sort of that go onto this a little bit, and not everyone's going to know how to necessarily. They either haven't necessarily worked with somebody on the spectrum in in their career they have, or they don't talk about it that much?
I have worked with, I have had coworkers on the spectrum.
Did the organizations that you work for at least do a reasonably good job accommodating?
Yes, yes, workforce development is really much individualized, and we take a humanistic approach to empowering others and supporting professional development.
Which I would make a little separate side argument on this when it comes, because I was just discussing an article today, which I asked you to read, because we can now sort of discuss that article a little bit, and then I'll mention a couple experiences that I've had with this, in which I it's not on you, but there's still a little bit of a ways to go. So the article I sent you, hold on, let's see where it is. Hold on. The Gen Z article. Remember
Right.
that one?
Yes.
So interestingly enough, my CTO and I were discussing that this morning. He's around our age, and he's doing a second bachelor's degree in computer science. But when he and I were discussing that this morning, I'm going to read a couple comments from him that I thought that stood out and were interesting. But basically, I said part of this, should start with the fact that universities might need to start doing a little bit of a better job trying to teach their students what you would encounter in the work world, because that's not covered. I mean, if you have managers, top complaint, which is Gen Z is difficult to work with, maybe it's not Gen Z or college, maybe it's the way corporate is structured. What do you think?
Here are my thoughts on, I think most colleges now are implementing work prep initiatives in their curricula.
What initiatives?
Work preparation, career preparation initiatives. Because I'm aware of a few colleagues who work in universities or in colleges where they do resume writing support and job search strategies and so forth. So we are getting better at that, but within the recent or prior to if we go 3 years back, this was sorely lacking, but I do believe that it looks promising now that these programs are being implemented and being focused on to develop the skills of early grads to support them in the workplace.
I feel like we needed these when we were all going through college, because that was something he and I both agreed on, which is there should have been mandatory placement services at universities and colleges. But I don't know if that was a funding issue back in the early 2010s, late 2000s, or colleges didn't want to. But, for example, I can remember a couple years ago when I called WCC to inquire about a few classes, and then one of the placement counselors in continuing education and workforce development and I were talking about, I wish I knew or was advised back in when I was working on my degree what I needed to look, per each role that I was looking for, to have an idea. Because if I'm getting rejected left and right, and they're saying you're not skilled enough or you're overqualified, it leads me to believe that somewhere along the line, whether it's college or the corporation itself, instead of spending money stupidly and saying, okay, well, we can give you up to $2,500 or $5,000, and then you can go and spend it on your own development. I feel like this should be the corporate's responsibility, because when our parents were growing up, that's what corporate did for them.
Yeah.
This is exactly what human resource departments literally did back in the 1960s, 70s, and 80s. So I'm wondering between the 80s and the 2010s exactly why they decided to go this whole it's on you, it's your responsibility to do X, Y, and Z.
Well, as I mentioned, when we entered into this part of the conversation, I think they're returning to providing that level of support, and it's been happening in the most recent years. I have close evidence of this, having colleagues working at various universities. But you are absolutely right in saying beyond the last 3 years, it has kind of lacked, but we're kind of getting on the ball with that now. I remember having to kind of feel my way through trying to find jobs and so forth after college. I think we had a placement department at the college. We had a career services department. Yes, we did. I graduated from City Tech on John Jay in Brooklyn, but the program and the services was not robust at all, and it was kind of lackluster during my time.
Interesting, because I have a different opinion on this, especially since I've seen the posts on several occasions.
Right.
Personal and professional development are two different things. If I want to do something outside of work, like, for example, podcast, that falls under personal development. Therefore, okay, fine. If you want that argument to be that's my responsibility, because you're friendly with some of the same people that I comment on with LinkedIn who've made those posts before. Right. I'm not going to name names, but when I see them, I'm like, I don't know if I 100% fully agree that I'm my best advocate, because if it sounds like a nice little warm fuzzy thing to make a post about, but in reality, it doesn't work like that in the real world. In reality, I'm going to be very upfront about something. Why do labor unions exist? Labor unions exist for advocating for the worker. The worker shouldn't always have to do it for themselves.
But may I ask a question?
Yes.
Without the worker speaking up, what would the labor union know what to advocate for?
Well, then yes. So in that situation, the worker should speak up to their labor union who would be representing them. Yes, that one I agree on. But I think the way those posts are usually structured, they're never straightforward, because not every worker is, honestly, from my experience. How many workers out there do you think actually have a college education? There's probably a larger percentage that don't nowadays and wouldn't know what to advocate for.
Well, there's a large intersection of professionals who are skilled laborers and very successful at it. I know a couple of friends who've just taken courses in computer programming and so forth, and just grew a career out of certifications, very successful, earning money out of a couple certifications. We also have our intersection of plumbers and electricians at skilled labor, not quite a degree, but are doing very successful. So,
well, it's funny because skilled labor, like, for example, trades, you don't start off skilled. It's the same thing as anything under the tech realm. You're going to start out unskilled until you learn along the way. But I will say this much: as tech grows, there's still going to be a need for labor trades. Like, for example, I would have liked to do it, but for somebody like me, it would have been a little too hard. Electrician is not going to be one of the easiest things to learn. With labor trades, for example, welding, electrician, bricklayer, mason, carpenter. If you can't learn the basics, it's not really going to be the best place for you.
Right.
That's going to be true at the very minimum with a college degree. You could probably be the most average person, still get a degree, but you would still need extra skills elsewhere. Because unfortunately, what my CTO and friend and I continually go back and forth on is very interesting, especially for two people like him and me who, also both have learning differences from everybody else. A college degree, I understand why HR likes them, but I don't think they're the best for everybody. Just like I don't think trades are the best for everybody.
And I agree with you. I fully agree.
And the most sad thing is when I see Mike Rowe, and I love this guy as a television host, but when I see him on Fox News, I practically want to go hit my head against the wall, because it's like, this with your foundation and just from doing your shows. Not everyone can do these jobs, but you're trying to talk to the most averagely intelligent American person out of going to college. Yes. They don't necessarily need to be going to college, but it would benefit them with their trade in addition to go to college. I think there needs to be a place within education. I don't know if this is a topic of discussion at universities, but I think there needs to be a place where both are needed.
Yes.
Because unfortunately now we have a lot of, listen, what I do in the medical field, they could supposedly replace. He argues with me on this. You can tell me if I'm inaccurate or incorrect on this. He likes to tell me they could replace you with artificial intelligence. I'm like, yeah, and then watch a riot come from anyone over the age of 79. Anyone who calls in to book an appointment who was born from 1925 to where does the silent generation end? 45, and then the boomers, including Gen Xers, us as well. When you call your doctor's office, do you want to speak to someone or do you want to speak to artificial intelligence?
I'd love to speak to someone.
We're all the same way on that. So as much as they want to say AI could replace, appointment booking, never going to happen. I see errors with this daily where nobody's booking their appointment correctly. So how can you just all of a sudden say, oh yeah, we don't need people anymore to do this? Yeah, you do.
Yes.
You need people on those phones to talk to patients. Now, if the issue is your wage, you don't want to pay us a certain level, then I guess I could understand that. But if there are going to be less and less, scheduling jobs projected over the next 5 to 10 years, you're eventually going to have to start paying that position more and more, since it has legitimately disgustingly high turnover. Nobody wants to stay in these roles.
Absolutely.
Just like nursing. Nurses make absolutely awesome money. They all want to leave. It's just like teaching. And they cite burnout, but I worked in a school district, interestingly enough. You know why most teachers are leaving? Because dealing with parents isn't that easy. They deal with parents, they're dealing with the generation right above us. They're dealing with our generation and whoever's becoming parents younger. It's a lot for teachers. Then they have to deal with the kids, and then whatever state you work in, it's the state mandates.
Yeah, absolutely.
Actually, interesting question. Have you had teachers come to you to write resumes?
I've had academic staff, academic administrative staff. I've had one college professor, but not elementary school teachers.
Interesting. I feel like elementary school teachers, they're still probably in a place where they're not sure what to do.
To be a teacher, you have to have heart. And I think most of them are in their roles because they enjoy nurturing and impressing upon young minds. If it were for the money and for the status, a lot of them would not be in it. I know this. My sister-in-law is a third grade teacher. So a lot of them are in it for the love of it, basically. So
Yeah, and in some areas they do make better salaries than they like to let on. A lot of them are unionized up here where I live, so they are like I have friends who are teachers and they're doing a lot better than me, at least in the salary sense, because the union's gotten them regular raises.
and I think with the specializations, like if you do a special ed or you have some reading recognition with higher scores for that, and
Special ed can be very
milestones.
challenging. I
Yeah,
was in those classes as well.
yeah. But what I'm saying is with those specializations, that's where the higher salaries would come for a teaching role.
Yeah, no, for sure, especially depending on the level of, where the kids are in terms of their disabilities and accommodations. So I think there's one more area I wanted to touch on, or maybe we'll pose a very interesting question. Not naming names, but when a resume writer, so I can understand, how do they determine their pricing with this? Because I know everybody charges different.
So a resume and its services priced upon experience level of the writer, and also the demographic or the sector, or your client profile, and that's where we gauge our prices. I serve mid-level career professionals to director roles or C-levels. And my prices commensurate with the salaries of those roles. And this is how a lot of resume writers gauge their pricing. It commensurates with the salaries, a percentage of the salaries that they write for. And it's only fair because basically we are responsible for articulating an entire career trajectory, and it takes time. There are a lot of branding elements that kind of goes into that, and a lot of research, keyword searching, and so forth. So, yeah.
So, in other words, it depends on the level of client you're serving, is
Yeah.
really what you're saying. Because some people I've noticed will charge probably for somebody in my situation a little more than they should. I had, for example, somebody come into my inbox earlier, like at the end of last month in the middle of the move. She offered to write a resume for up to $70, which was pretty reasonable. But she also worked at a recruiting agency. So maybe that's why they can do that kind of potential offer. I mean, whether I need it or not right now, what I'm doing right now, aside from this podcast, is I'm in the reskilling phase.
Right.
So if I'm not applying or I'm doing it very, 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 very passively, there's a reason for it.
Mm-hmm.
With my luck, especially with the fact that, being an autistic adult is a little challenging to these companies because of the fact that there's, if I disclose, I've lost out on opportunities in the past. If I don't disclose, they're still going to figure out, some way to determine whether I'm qualified or overqualified, or I'll just get ghosted. I mean, the last 2 interviews that I had at my alma mater, basically, I never heard back from the director for a nursing school coordinator role, and not much I can do on that one. I did hear back from from a student accounts department accounting role. Basically, they decided to eliminate me and go with someone they thought was more qualified for the second of a 3-round interview.
Right.
And at that point, I'm like, so now I'm overqualified, supposedly, quote unquote, for an entry level position. You know, at this point, this is why people like me end up running a business, because it's like, I don't know what they want anymore.
I fully agree. I understand.
It's like you want Gen Z, but now you don't want to work with Gen Z. You want someone, I don't know, what's the most standard recruiting joke you can think of? We're recruiting for a role that wants 10 years of experience, but they want to pay you entry level.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or they want 5 years of experience, but the role is technically a sophomore role being paid at a entry level.
Yes.
Or you want 20 years. You basically want to pay a boomer with 20 to 30 years of experience entry level again. And how many boomers are going to take that kind of a deal at this point in their life?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so I think we just hit about the 30-minute mark, correct?
Yes, we did.
All right. Thank you for coming out and
thank you.
With a good story and a fun episode. All right.
Thank you so much, Ben.
We'll have you back again soon when I figure out panel debate discussions on my other format. Okay.
I would love to.
All right.
You know. Bye.
All right. Have a good night.
You too. Bye.
All right. Now pull that article. Okay, now that Tammy's gone, I have a little time left, so I think what we're going to do is we're going to touch on the article that I was just discussing with her. So, in this article, as she and I discussed, Gen Z right now is getting a lot of flack. So, for those who are sort of wanting to be familiar with the generations, Gen Z are those born between 1997 and 2012. Before that, millennials who are now managers, as Tammy and I are, were born between 1981 and ended at 1996. Before this, we have Generation X, anyone born from 1965 to 1980. Before that, we have baby boomers. This is 1946 to 1964. So this is the seniors in the workforce, the actual seniors. So, as she suggested, Gen Z right now, I'm going to read something from this article. I believe in misconception about Gen Z is that they are so engrossed in new technology that they lack interpersonal skills. It's a bad rap. And when you think about it, every generation of worker has been unfairly stereotyped in a way. Baby boomers have been described as resistant to change and learning of new technology. Some labeled Gen X as apathetic and cynical. Millennials have been branded as entitled and job hoppers. Now, let's explore each of these. Boomers are broken into 3 categories. So where this article is a little off is when trying to understand the boomers. Boomers born from 1946 to 1950, around the 1953, 1954 area, these would be the ones who are probably a little resistant to technology change and have kind of a certain way of doing something. From 1955 to 1964, which is the Jones generation of baby boomers, these are the baby boomers who, make up, for example, 1964 Vice President Kamala Harris, who's running for the president, my mother and father, who were both born in 55 and 56, etc., who are a little more comfortable with technology, but having to constantly reskill as well in their own minds, as they've been the ones who actually, and and I'll get to millennials in a minute. Generation X being described as cynical sort of is very interesting. And now when we get to millennials, job hoppers, this was a lot of baby boomers. Most baby boomers born from 65 to 64, from 55 to 64. This was kind of more them because they had to move around a bit for different reasons. Like my father, because he was raising 3 kids. So these sweeping generalizations are unfair and seem to arise every time a new generation makes its mark. Gen Z, for example, has what we call an agile mindset and core values. Agile mindset basically is referring to the fact that in this article that they're in perpetual change or trying to constantly change. But now Gen Z, many of them were affected directly by the coronavirus pandemic and the lockdowns. They were going to Zoom. They were going to Zoom classes. Their whole school world went digital, whereas millennials didn't have to worry about that because we had the traditional experience. So I think if the complaint today is in terms of workforce development, personal and professional development, I think on some level, corporate should be the first ones who are really held responsible for this after the colleges and universities. Meaning my belief at this point would be colleges and universities should get on board and form a partnership. And that's at least what I think. I think they should all partner and then eventually make some things easier for not just Gen Z who are going to and coming out of college, but now you have Gen Alpha and what's next going to be Gen Beta, who are going to be kids of, varied millennials and Gen Z who are becoming parents at this point. I mean, if they're worried about Gen Z's communication issues, yeah, Gen Z doesn't have easy lingo to understand, but neither did millennials. If that was the case, Gen X was a lot different. They loved listening to music, and boomers would be the old conservatives at this point. And then last but not least with this article, I mean, companies providing flexibility to them. This is exactly why this whole, working remote has even become a topic of discussion. And it's not always a good topic for discussion, especially on LinkedIn. I feel like most people are just using it for clickbait. So that ends this part of the segment. We're going to review one more article, I think. No, that's about it today. That was my little segment for you guys post Tammy on the podcast interview. So I'm glad that you all stopped by and that she stopped by. I'll see you at the next one.